Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another action-packed virtual tour with Pretty Gritty Tours. As always, I'm your guide, Chris, tonight, a tour guide and operator here in the South Sound region. And thank you for taking time out to join me on your Memorial Day evening. I hope it was a safe and wonderful weekend for everyone out there. And I'm excited tonight to share with you the exciting story of Sumner, Washington. I think Sumner gets overlooked at the traveler's peril. There is a lot to do distilled down into a small town, and I get to share some of that with you guys tonight. Now, while this is not the Centennial of Sumner tour, several, if not the majority of the buildings in their downtown core turn 100. In particular, 7 buildings turn 100 years old right now, and this is the year to get to celebrate them. So we're going to look at which buildings there are there. We're looking at 2 of them specifically tonight, and then I'm going to cut you loose on your own sort of exploratory scavenger hunt out there. And this has been nicely laid out for you by the people at the Sumner Main Street Association and the Sumner Historical Society. So I'm just the messenger getting to share the good news with you all. Because this is a live tour, feel free to comment along on our Facebook or YouTube channel. I will do my best to answer your questions and to get you stoked about exploring the Pacific Northwest, my true mission at all times. So let's jump on in. Again, this is brought to you by the Sumner Main Street Association. And as I mentioned, this year marks the centennial specifically for 7 buildings in Sumner. And when you look at it, it's pretty remarkable because from 1921 to 1922, more buildings were added to the main street than any other period in Sumner's history. Like, they just went bananas putting all this infrastructure downtown. And today you can go down to the Sumner Main Street Association shop. It's right across from Heritage Park in the main downtown area there. And you can get more information on the sort of centennial walk that they've got going on down there. Also, for those of you who are interested in doing a little more with your day, they are home to the world's smallest rhubarb museum. I haven't fact-checked this globally. No one has come forward to contest it, but I believe they are still holding the title for the world's smallest rhubarb museum. If you're not familiar with Sumner, they do rhubarb real well. So the other thing that you can experience down here, though, is like this perfect time capsule slice of Americana. I love this shot here. I'm going to try and make it a little bigger for you here. That the Sumner Main Street Association and their Historic Society are promoting as part of the Centennial celebration, because it's just a perfect then and now of downtown Main Street Sumner. This is Sumner in the 1920s. Actually, I believe this is actually specifically from the 1930s. But what's remarkable to me about Sumner is that you have this perfect core sample of America in the 1920s, because the majority of their main street was created in a very tight frame all at once, and then survived destruction through the horrifying time of the 60s through the 80s, where a lot of historic structures were just demolished to make way for whatever, and then forgotten about. And so as you're walking around downtown Sumner today, you can see all of these old structures down there. And what I think is really, really cool about them is that they still house small businesses and locals, and they are cradles to the entrepreneur, which is what they've always been. In particular, this building here, it used to be the Masonic Lodge downtown. And so when you're looking at this photo here, if you look down on the right sort of center there, you can see the white caps of the old Masonic Lodge down there. And when you're looking down the street, you can still see that building right there. This is the close-up of it as it is today. Almost all of the brick structures down there are from the 1920s through the 1930s, and they're worth celebrating. And there's some really fantastic ones down here. This one So in the 1870s, a guy named George Ryan moved to Washington State, and he's important to us because this is where the name Sumner is going to come from. Because a lot of people have asked me why Sumner is called Sumner, and the truth is it wasn't always. Let me take you on a journey through time, my friends. So George Ryan comes out to Washington State from Wisconsin, and in the 1870s, he was a bookkeeper for a sawmill in the area. Basically, everyone was working for a sawmill or the railroad at that point and wanted some business opportunities. And my man, Ezra Meeker, Hop King of the world, introduced him to a woman by the name of Laura, who had a cabin and 40 acres for him that he could buy out there. He bought it, and boom, the Ryan House exists. Now, this structure is one of the main focal pieces to the Sumner history out there. And it's pivotal because in the 1880s, this was operating as the post office for then called Stuck Junction. And I have yet to find a detailed description of why Sumner in the 1880s was called Stuck Junction, but I'm sure the railroad had something real classy and good for that. If anybody knows, please let me know. But Mr. George Ryan, to the best of my knowledge, makes up this story. Like, I don't know the exact reason that it's called Sumner, but this is what Ryan comes up with, that no one could agree on a name for this town because Stuck Junction got renamed to Franklin, and there was already a Franklin in the Washington Territory. So as everything was becoming close to statehood, all these county auditors went out and they're like, okay, there can't be multiple Franklins. We need to clear up this chaos. What are you going to name your town? And according to Ryan, they were like, well, what we'll do is we'll put 3 names in a hat, have some kid come in and pick one at random. And the name he chose was Sumner. And again, this is a fabrication that has now just been accepted as fact out there. So why the town is actually named Sumner, honestly, doesn't even matter, because the story has become the truth. And Sumner was chosen in honor of the late senator. This here is Charles Sumner, who was a very popular senator at that time. He was a strong abolitionist that fought against slavery. And when he died in the, I believe, 1860s, I think he might even say down here, his fame and popularity skyrocketed even more. And so his name ends up on the Northern Pacific Railroad freight terminal right downtown in Sumner, and hey presto, there it is. You can still see some homages to the original name of Sumner, Stuck Junction, right down here at Stuck Junction Saloon, which is right in the heart of our 1920s corridor. And of the buildings that we're going to talk about tonight, basically all of them sort of swirl around that 1920s section right down there. And it is, in my opinion, here's the reason that this exists. In 1895, the only fireproof building, quote, quote, in Sumner burns to the ground. And so everyone was like, oh, shoot, we're going to have to make some changes in our life. And if you look at the Sanborn fire maps, you can see this is from 1919. There weren't a bunch of brick structures downtown, but there were right up here in the sort of center upper right. There were a healthy collection of brick buildings right there. And then in the 1920s, we see a major change in the way that people travel in Washington State. And the mosquito fleet starts to go by the wayside. People aren't just taking little individual ferries all throughout the Puget Sound as actively as they used to be, because there are now roads, automobiles, and the expansive ability to get to places like Rainier National Park just on a whim. And so as the road comes through, Sumner becomes a bigger, more important stop. And one of the things that really puts them on the map, literally and figuratively, is the addition of a bus fleet. So the majority of historic photos that you can find of 1920s Sumner are with the Tacoma Stage Company, and their bus is back here. And these ones in the back down there were specifically used for taking people out to Wilkeson, Mount Rainier, and sort of just like tourist spots that people wanted to get out and explore that you didn't have the opportunity to really do. It was an arduous journey to go out and see those places before the expansion of the automobile and the road network. So boom, a huge explosion of buildings happens, and now you get to experience them because of the hard work of the Sumner Historical Society. So as you're walking around downtown Sumner today, you get to see some really detailed maps, like this one from, it's a reproduction of an 1890s map that kind of gives you the lay of the land. And this is pretty much an accurate map to what you see today as far as the road layout. So this is Sumner today. Maple, Main, Alder. It's Cherry now, but I believe it would have been Narrow Avenue at the time. Runs right along where the train depot was. And so as you're looking at these maps, you can see that the layout of the city is basically the same, but it is the structures that have changed very dramatically. And again, I can't stress this enough. From 1921 to 1922, you just see an explosion of fireproof brick structures taking up this main street, which has now become a major transportation hub for people traveling throughout the Pacific Northwest. If you are interested in learning more about that, the Sumner Historical Society has a great website, and the thing that they've done, in my opinion, particularly well is maintain a collection of newspapers, and they are in the active pursuit of digitizing them today. I think they have, yikes, 5 years now, 5 years that have been digitized. So if you go onto their digital archive, you can see the news stories that were popular at the time. This one from the 1980s caught my attention because it's about this guy from Montana who was coming through town and writing fake prescriptions to get all these illegal drugs. And the pharmacist in Sumner cracked the case, and they arrest this guy who was on a major crime spree going throughout the country. Beautiful stuff. Please take a look at their digital archives. But this is the way that we got to experience the sort of like flavor of the times. And now they've gone through and established little placards, which is something that I always want more cities to do, you know, and which is crazy because it's putting me out of business. But as a guide, as someone who tries to bridge the gap between what was and what is now and get people excited in finding ownership of their historic stories, something that would really help across the board is if there were just little plaques on all these buildings. The Sumner Historic Society has taken a step further with their Centennial building celebration. And if you go downtown right now, you'll see these cool flyers in a lot of the storefronts down there that have little QR codes, but also have very helpful and detailed descriptions of what the building used to be, what it was throughout time, and then a little bit about what it is today. And this is not just a fun walk down history road tonight. This is an active call to get you guys to go out and explore downtown Sumner, because they have such a cool collection of niche, boutique, locally owned places to go and shop. And their restaurants and stores, I think, are every bit as engaging as they were in the 1920s. When you're traipsing down, I want you also to remember that a lot of the like automotive boom that put Sumner on the map was showcased very heavily down there. And when you look at those like old fire insurance maps, you see a cool sort of clash between the old school businesses. Like there is a blacksmith office and forge right next door to like a new automotive body shop in 1919. You can see the bus depot down there that really was a major commercial generator to the downtown corridor at that time as well. And this one I really love. This was an active ad that they had in downtown Sumner in 1920 showing the largest commercially made tire, which, for those of you curious, was 44 by 10 inches. And they put it in front of the Orton Brothers Motor Company back in May. And it's an all-weather Goodyear tire. And what I love that they did here is they carried it around on the back of this truck, showcasing the standard tire size directly underneath the new Goodyear tire. And then had the massive tire up there. And they're like, hey, are you tired of going out for your Sunday drive and getting flats? Put the largest tire that you possibly can on your truck and never have a problem again. And the Orton brothers, William and Charles, were all about it. They were also huge in the orchard industry, for those of you who are interested. And I think sort of that mix and match entrepreneurship is something that really contributed to Sumner's success and still does today. You could have an active orchard out there, but still sell the world's largest tires as your day job. And that sort of mix and match is what has kept Sumner on the map for so long. The buildings that we're going to talk about tonight are in particular 1006 Main Street, which for those of you who have been to Sumner, you may know as Picket Fence today. And I want to roll a clip for you guys here really quick, because what I love about Sumner is it looks the same in so many ways. Like if you were to walk downtown Sumner in the 1920s, it would look so remarkably similar to the way that it does today. And the Sumner Historic Society has this great quote on their website that I'm going to paraphrase for you. But essentially, what makes it remarkable is that all of those historic structures were built at the same time, have been preserved over the years. And so if you were to take a survey of the area, you wouldn't find necessarily a building that's like, oh my gosh, this is the grandest brick structure that's ever been made. There's no like Stadium High School to really put it on the map. What makes it unique and special is that it's unified. That if you were to have a movie set be built of 1920s small town America, it would look like Sumner, Washington. And so to have the opportunity to go and visit that whenever you want, pretty special stuff. So this is of Main Street Sumner today. And if you put a sepia tone on it, it might as well have been Main Street Sumner in the 1920s. These are the main historic structures from that 1920s building boom out there. And this is also the main drag of Main Street. And I love that this guy just happened to be cruising around in his vintage automobile just to make my day a little better. Picket Fence that you briefly saw there is the building that we're really going to sort of focus on in the beginning tonight to give you a flavor for what once was and what continues to be today. But this is the top of the former Masonic Lodge right there. And really, very little has changed over the long years here in Sumner. So Picket Fence, as we know it today, was first occupied. It was built in 1921 as a retail space. The first occupant comes in with the Sumner Variety Store. And the business was owned by a guy named D.W. Thorpes, who had been living in the community already for 5 years in an older, sort of more rundown structure downtown. And by moving into this location here, he was able to double his product. Now, I don't want you to get confused because we are technically looking at two buildings here. The structure on the left is they share a wall. It's two separate storefronts, but with a single brick wall in the middle there. So we're looking at Picket Fence on the right over there. And to give you a little bit better look of it, I've got a video clip for you here in a second. But he sold books, magazines, candy, and school supplies. And then later he sold it to a guy from Puyallup who turned it into the Maple Leaf confectionery business. And then later in 1925, that became the Parrot Confectionery. And they were all about, they basically went from selling school supplies to selling like sundries for school kids. So it was had a menu of light lunches, quality ice cream, and then Ward's homemade candies, fresh boxed. And the Parrot's motto was, "Your money's worth every time." And they had this classy ad with the giant-headed bobble parrot there. And if you find yourself downtown Sumner, you can take the Sumner or Historic Society's walking tour. I'll share the details on that later, but it gives you an opportunity to go through. And I wanted to sort of flesh out that experience tonight with some more black and white photos. This is not from that particular building, but is from that same time period. So it gives you sort of an idea of like the businesses operating in the area. The Parrot gets purchased in 1926. There was a lot of changeover in the building. And then in 1930, gets sold to a different couple out of Seattle, and then they close it that same year. Finally, in the 1930s, 1932, the Dracobly clothing family comes in and has dry goods and clothing. And there are some great stories of that time of people who came in and were friends with the Armenian family that were working there and would always look for these creases on overalls. Like this woman would come in, put all the overalls up on the counter and then go through them. And if she saw like a color demarcation or crease in there, she knew that those weren't the most freshly made overalls in the area and would put those to the side. She only wanted ones with uniform color to make sure that she was buying the best for her husband out there. Eventually, in the 1950s, this changes hands again and changes again and again until most recently, if you've been down there, I believe it was in 1993 that a woman by the name of Luann purchased it and turned it into a picket fence, which is, I believe, voted the best gift shop in South Puget Sound, and has really incredible stuff inside. I'm going to roll the clip for you guys here really quick so that you can actually see inside the building and take a look. So this is the exterior of that building. This is 1008, 1006 Main Street. And then the picket fence building right here, the sort of metal awning up on the top there is not original to it, but was added not too late afterwards, I think in the late 1920s. And what was so great about these buildings at the time is that they had the recessed display cases here, which allowed for people to display clothing and goods in their windows so people walking down Main Street could see them, but they wouldn't get bleached by the sunlight. This is inside picket fence today, and you can see they have such a cool collection of really anything that you can imagine, and it's all tastefully curated to the hip shopper today. What I like about this in particular, though, is that it has maintained its locality. It is not just in the historic structure, but it has taken that sort of like dry goods everything store and translated it into something accessible for today. And to have been operating since the 1990s this way is really a testament, especially through the previous year. You know, the 1920s had just come off of a pretty tragic time. The 2020s is in a similar position where we are in this process of trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And to have been a small business that continued to exist through the last year is a true testament to their quality and skill, I think. If you're looking at the building today, it is still super, super good looking and is directly across the street from that Masonic Lodge that I was telling you about a little bit earlier. Now, the building next door is 1008 Main, and weirdly enough has almost always been a hardware business. The Howe family were in the hardware business before, when they purchased this early in the 1920s. And then Henson Hardware, I think, became the first official occupant of this, opening for business in the September zone of 1922. And then they had a hardware store and plumber and retail all inside. And they lived locally in a small bungalow in the area I think only like 3 blocks from the store, and then operated everything up here. This ends up becoming Wings Hardware in the 1930s. And then in 1958, it still had Wings Hardware as the address of this particular building. Then when Fred Wing and his wife Gertrude moved to Bellingham out of Sumner, and they end up, I think, transferring this for a period of time. In the 1960s, it becomes Ludden, which I think I might be mispronouncing, but Ludden Hardware, Ludden, when a couple by the name of Jerry and Dolores Ludden moved to Sumner from Seattle. It's like the families just switched. One left the area to go up to Seattle, the other came from Seattle down, start their hardware business here. And that continues up through, I think, 1984, when they move it across the street into the old Masonic building at 1011 Main Street. And there they rebrand to a True Value Hardware. And it's a great story because they said that half the town came out and helped them move everything. And so they technically never closed a day. They remained in operation as they moved all of their stock across the street into the new business. Then it finally transferred from something as a hardware store into a clothing and fashion business under the name The Clothing Express, and then eventually became Sparrow and Nightingales, which is an antique, vintage, locally crafted shop operating downtown today. But here's one of the ads from the old Hinson hardware store operating down there, and a map right here that shows you sort of that time period downtown right off Main Street. And you can see on the left there, I believe vacant lot and vacant building is what we would have been looking at for there. So these have continued to operate from 1921 to 2021. And as you're cruising around downtown Main Street today, you can still see these buildings beautifully preserved and with fantastic local businesses and community members still inside, which I can't stress enough how cool that is to me, that Sumner isn't just, a static piece of the past. It's something that has continued to operate throughout time with the strength of what it originally started with, If you look at the vintage photographs of the area, there's some really great stuff. I'm a big fan of this one from the Washington Cooperative Association picnic, which was technically 1936, so not the 1920s, but it fits in my 20s, 30s category. If you find yourselves wanting a little bit more, you can look up the Walking Main with the Tacoma Historic Society on their website there. And then they have a CLIO, C-L-I-O, self-guided tour for those who want to go out and explore the history of Sumner while you are downtown looking at these buildings. You can also go inside and shop at them. You can have one foot in the 1920s, one foot in the 2020s, and get the best of the whole experience. And I always encourage people to look at this one in particular, because I think this is the cornerstone of the historic district. It's one of the coolest looking buildings down there. And this was built in 1922, the Leverins building. And it's always been like prime corner storefront. And I think originally had a fountain confectionery and cafe at the bottom, which later became the Sugar Bowl store, and had like doctor's offices on top. If you're looking for a little bit more too, you can also pick up any of these maps with the Sumner Main Street Association. They've got them in their main office down there, but I also saw them in like Trackside Pizza, all throughout the main businesses down there. So you can get a better feel for what you're looking at as you're walking down there. Now, this was just a taste. I just wanted to get you guys excited. So we're really only touching on 2 of the 7 buildings for downtown Sumner. My hope is that we can get a little more in depth on the 5 remaining structures that get to celebrate their 100-year-old birthday this year, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on down there. And I really want to sort of taffy out and explore all those buildings but it is Memorial Day. It's an exciting holiday, and I want to make sure that you guys have the opportunity to go and savor that a little bit more tonight. So we're just doing a brief tour tonight, but I've got tons of information that I'd like to share with you guys through links. And again, if you look at the Sumner Main Street Association website and go check out the Sumner Historic Society, because they have all of those cool newspaper archives on there, as well as a lot of the heartfelt stories about the families that have made these businesses successful for now 100 years. So go check those both out. And if you have questions, please let me know. And I think I'm just going to check the comments. Yeah, so Phoenix Lodge is still there. And it, I believe, has always operated as the Masonic Lodge on the upper floor. The Masons have always been really good at building large lodges in downtown cores and then having the lower floors available for local businesses. And that continues to be the case today. So I believe Phoenix Lodge is still a functional Masonic lodge on the upper floors, and then they still have small businesses on the lower floors down there as well. And let's see. Yep. And yeah, I agree. One of the things that has made the Washington area so accessible is its ability to maintain its historic integrity while still, getting with the times and making everything happen. And yes, the ribbon cutting for Sumner is tomorrow at noon. So if you find yourselves downtown Sumner tomorrow, Tuesday, which the weather should be prime, it's a great opportunity to get out there and do something new. If you've enjoyed your tour tonight and you want to show your appreciation, you can always tip your guide on the homepage of prettygrittytours.com. We are doing our best to make sure that everybody knows about the rich treasures out here in the Pacific Northwest. And if you'd like to see more, please leave that feeling down in the comments below, because we are working with the Sumner Main Street Association and the Sumner Historic Society to hopefully get a little more going as well. And there is talk about hopefully leading an in-person walking tour soon, so we can actually get out and see a lot of these buildings, and we can hopefully add some charm and flair to the downtown area. I don't know who's going to find charm and flair. Hopefully I can find Paul if he's available. All right, guys, thank you so much. Hopefully I'll see you soon. Until then, enjoy your Memorial Day, what few hours are left. And as always, keep on exploring.